people in the region to be able to produce 40,000 metric tons of cereal. Again, I realize that there's a lot of numbers here, but really the key point I want to underscore is around the time sensitivity that exists for us. A final comment too, if I could, just about resilience before I hand back. I was struck strongly by the actions that government, that partners, UN agencies, including FAO and others, have been able to put in place to strengthen the resilience. I've given you some data points that speak to a deeply concerning situation. But colleagues, I would underscore the fact that despite the fact that we've had 3 failed rains consecutively, despite the fact that we've had a desert locust at significant scale ravaging this part of Africa, despite the fact that we've had these challenges with the ripple effects of COVID-19 and all of the other factors that you're familiar with, we still haven't had a famine at scale as a result of all of these things. And that is a testimony to resilient actions that governments, partners, and the UN agencies have put in place. But we have now, I think, reached the limit of what's possible in that regard, and we simply do need to make sure that we're scaling up a response, always with actions focused on strengthening underlying resilience of these vulnerable communities. So this is very much the situation as we face it now. Time is running out. We have this window through to June. We need to keep a close eye on what happens with the long rains, and above all, we do need support on an interagency basis for the actions that FAO and other partners are putting in place in support of government. So a very, very concerning situation, and I thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts in that regard today. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Edie Leder, Associated Press.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. When you talked about driving and seeing dead livestock everywhere, what percentage of the livestock in the real drought areas are still left? And of the $130 million that FAO needs, have you gotten?
Villagers are praying for rain, but it just won't come. A 4th season of failed rains is causing one of the worst droughts East Africa has seen in decades, and this village, which is home to 3,600 families, is one of the areas hardest hit. The land is dry, dusty, and barren. The remaining livestock eat the withered grey shrubs which cover the land. The people eat whatever they can find, often not very much. Since this latest drought started last year, there have been countless cases of malnutrition. Families have become desperate for food and water. Millions of children are malnourished. Livestock, which pastoralist families rely on for food and livelihoods, have died. The drought stretches far beyond the small Kenyan village, and the UN's World Food Programme says up to 20 million people in East Africa are at risk of severe hunger. Ethiopia is battling the worst drought in almost half a century, and in Somalia, 40% of the population are at risk of starvation.
We have a massive shipment today of 120 tons of medical supplies that are on its way to Somalia to support the drought response. Good morning from Copenhagen. It's 7:30 in the morning, very cold, and we're about to start loading.
We in UNICEF are particularly concerned about the situation of children, about the children that are affected by malnutrition, by outbreak of diseases such as cholera and measles. And in UNICEF, we are working very hard with the government, with our partners also from the UN agencies, from the non-governmental organizations, on providing services and response to children and to their communities.
The causes of this international crisis are complex and show no sign of abating. Climate change has been a chief concern. According to the United Nations, In a desolate village in Turkana, northern Kenya, it's change. This is despite the fact it contributes only 4% of global carbon emissions. Ongoing conflicts in Ethiopia and Somalia are further exacerbating the already precarious conditions. Although far away, the conflict in Ukraine has also played a role causing food prices to soar, worsening fears of hunger for communities who must buy food when they cannot grow their own. Ukraine has also captured much of the world's attention and resources. As a result, aid budgets are stretched and there is no telling when or even if enough assistance will come to East Africa. 2.5 years of meager rain have shriveled crops, killed livestock, and brought the Horn of Africa, one of the world's poorest regions, to famine's brink. Millions of people have faced food and water shortages. Hundreds of thousands have fled their homes seeking relief. A below normal forecast for the current rainy season means the suffering could continue. Human-caused climate change has made droughts of such severity at least 100 times as likely in this part of Africa as they were in the pre-industrial era. An international team of scientists said in a study the findings starkly illustrate the misery that the burning of fossil fuels, mostly by wealthy countries, inflicts on societies that emit almost nothing in comparison. In parts of the nations hit hardest by the drought, Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia, climate hazards have piled on top of political and economic vulnerabilities. The region's string of weak raining season is now the longest in around 70 years of reliable rainfall records. But according to the study, what has made this drought exceptional isn't just the poor rain, but the high temperatures that have parched the land.
The drought is having a major effect on the people here in this country. Close to 10 million people affected by the drought right now. The fourth rainy season has failed, and we're worried that the fifth is going to fail as well. And just in this region, the Somali region, close to 1 million people have actually been displaced by the drought, leaving everything behind, losing everything, and trying to find some space where they can have water and services. The programming of UNICEF has been, of course, around what children need. So obviously water is extremely important. It's also making sure the health services are in place, and making sure that when children suffer from malnutrition or diarrhea, they get the kind of help, including the ready-to-use therapeutic food they need. And then in some cases it's cash. It's actually giving cash to families so they can actually go to the market and buy what they need. And then finally, education. Interesting to see a lot of the people who have been displaced, a lot of those children go to school for the first time. This is their first contact with education. We need to do two things. One is we need to save lives right now. We need to bring the water, the health, the food, the cash that actually people need to survive right now. But we need to find longer-term solutions. So it's about climate-resilient water systems. It's about recreating livelihood around water points that actually are sustainable throughout the year. It's about recreating services and recreating a life for those people in areas where they can actually remain and get on their lives in the longer term. What we need from the international community right now is immediate support for life-saving activities. But of course, we also need that they engage in longer-term development funding over a number of years so that we can actually do longer-term solutions. So we need both, life-saving resources, longer-term resources, and to come at the same time together so that we can.
The study estimated that periods as hot and dry as the recent one now have a roughly 5% chance of developing each year in the region, a figure that is poised to rise as it continues to warm, said Joyce Kimutai, principal meteorologist at the Kenya Meteorological Department and the study's lead author. She said, quote, "We are likely to see the combined effects of low precipitation with temperatures causing rarely exceptional droughts in this part of the world," end of quote. Climate groups have for years pointed to the calamity in East Africa as evidence of the immense harm inflicted on poor regions by global warming from emissions of heat-trapping gases. The new analysis could give more ammunition to those urging polluter nations to pay for the economic damage attributable to their emissions. At the United Nations climate talks last year in Egypt, diplomats from nearly 200 countries agreed to establish a fund to help vulnerable nations cope with climate disasters.
This year and this conference are all about implementation. Countries have to deliver on what they promised.
But they're not. Your memorable phrase, 1.5 is on life support, you said in Glasgow. It's in the mortuary now, isn't it?
Well, it is still very much on life support, and the window the window is closing, but there is still a chance of getting there. We've had 29 countries come forward with their revised 2030 emission reduction targets.
29 from 193.
Well, I believe we will see some more at this conference, and we will see some more at the end, before the end of this year. But I think what that did, that whole sort of yearly ratchet, it has changed the way that countries are approaching this. I know of countries, one of which actually set out their revised number this year, and they're thinking about doing another one next year.
What about those, and there are many of them, who say, look, we've got a cost of living crisis, we've got Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, as you say. We just haven't got the time or the money for this issue of climate now.
What I'd say is actually the cost of inaction is going to be far, far greater for us than the cost of taking action now. I mean, if you look at some of the predictions, they're talking about, up to 20-30% impact on global GDP, on the global economy, a reduction by those percentages by the end of the century, unless we get a grip of this. And actually, this is absolutely about the environment. This is leaving a better future for future generations. But this is also about economic.
In